Now, just before you leave today, maybe you're looking for something else to watch, why not check out my new channel called Warographics? Want to know all of the details about some of history's most famous battles and wars? Come join me on Warographics, from Sherman's March to the Sea to Operation Barbarossa. If it's got people fighting each other, or occasionally animals, we will cover it. There is a link below. Who built the pyramids of Giza? How was Stonehenge made? Who were the Nazca lines carved for? If you ask the right, or depending on your perspective, the wrong people, you'll get a catch-all answer. And that answer is aliens. Among conspiracy theories, those involving aliens have captured people's imaginations like nothing else, and they've held on with a vice-like grip. No thanks to the History Channel. Look up any historical mystery and you will find an extraterrestrial theory attempting to connect the dots. Seriously, just try it. Who shot JFK? Aliens. How was Queen Elizabeth living so long? Lizard aliens.
I think that's true.
What caused the dinosaurs? Look. It's aliens. It's always aliens, except it's not.
Of course they are.
Extraterrestrial conspiracy theories are so popular that a recent poll has said that 57% of Americans believe that they are real, which, that's not that high. I definitely believe aliens are real. Have they ever been here? No. Are they real? The universe is really big. Bacteria, yes. Intelligent aliens, almost certainly. The trail of breadcrumbs that led through these out-of-this-world stories always seems to start with sightings of UFOs. Nowadays, UFO sightings have become something of an American pastime. In fact, former presidents Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan both claim to have seen UFOs. It's only human nature to be captivated by something so mysterious. Another part of human nature is wanting it for ourselves. For almost as long as UFO mania has been around, people have attempted to recreate these flying discs. I mean, who wouldn't want to soar through the universe as equals alongside our extraterrestrial overlords? So, don your tinfoil hats, prepare to probe into the mysterious depths of UFOs. Today we're taking a look at the real-life stories of flying discs and our attempts to build flying saucers. The first sighting of a UFO was reported on June 24th, 1947. Kenneth Arnold was flying his private plane at Mount Rainier in Washington when he witnessed 9 disc-shaped objects. Upon landing, he reported it to the authorities. Of course, the press promptly caught wind of his sensational story. In interviews, Arnold claimed that the objects were flying at a speed of several thousand miles per hour and moved like saucers skipping on water. The papers ran with the term and, well, flying saucer came to be. A flood of other sightings from around the country followed. Arnold's Cold War fears were seeping into American society just as fast as UFO mania. Often, the two were related. Fears sprouted up that UFOs were advanced Soviet aircraft. I guess before aliens started taking blame for unexplained phenomena, the Soviets were the go-to scapegoat, and also far more likely. The fears were so strong that the Air Force launched Project Sign in 1948 to investigate the possibility. A slew of government inquiries followed, examining tens of thousands of sightings across the US and consulting dozens of scientific experts. Initial conclusions ruled out the possibilities of the unidentified crafts posing national security threats. However, a theory mentioned in passing claimed that the crafts could be from other worlds. That person. Okie dokie, how are you paid by the government? And with that, the extraterrestrial hypothesis was born. Perhaps the panels wanted to distract the public from top-secret government projects, or maybe they actually believed aliens were a possibility. Guess which one I think it is. But it's interesting to look back and wonder if they knew the seed they were planting would grow into one of the most vast, one of the most deep-rooted networks of conspiracies today. Despite reports from later government investigations claiming a vast majority of UFO sightings resulted from other causes, from bright planets to weather balloons to birds and searchlights, the public paranoia over alien presence in our world only grew. The more the government tried to explain it away, the more the public were convinced that the CIA was covering something up. And as we can all learn from that, the lesson is, never try. The Roswell incident of 1947, infamous still today, was the backbone of many a UFO conspiracy. The mystery deals with the wreckage of a supposed crashed UFO and alien bodies that were recovered near Roswell, New Mexico. Initial reports told of a flying disc, while others claimed it was a downed weather balloon. The confusion and intrigue stretched on for decades until the late 1990s. The Air Force released reports saying that the flying disc theories, as well as the weather balloon stories, were all fake. In reality, they claimed the crash was that of a highly classified string of microphone-equipped balloons, and the alien bodies were just the remains of test dummies. Dean's Project Mogul, the mission's aim was to float balloons over the Soviet Union and pick up audio intelligence. The cover stories, they claimed, were needed to protect the secret nature of this geopolitically delicate work. But this explanation satisfied only some people. Still today, the terms Roswell and Area 51 stir even the most novice of conspiracy theorists into a frenzy. Even as recently as 2019, the belief in the extraterrestrial explanation was enough to have 2 million people commit to storming Area 51, even if only 150 actually showed up. It's easy to join a Facebook group, it's not so easy to fly across the country and storm a government base. UFO mania is still alive and well today, but just because you're seen as crazy doesn't mean you're not right, even if just a tiny bit. Although no government inquiry or independent investigation has turned up hard evidence of alien-controlled UFOs, there have been brief moments in history where flying discs were almost a reality, though very terrestrial. Humans controlled these flying saucers. It was 1952, and the Korean War was coming to a bloody stalemate. The US military emerged from the conflict holding helicopter capabilities in high regard. Little did they know that the Vietnam War would soon have everyone shouting, "Get to the chopper!" Capable of carting soldiers and supplies behind enemy lines with no need for a runway, the helicopter made countless missions in the dense Vietnamese jungle reality. But the helicopter has a bit of a drawback. Speed. Although the helicopter's landing distance was short, the process of vertical touchdowns and takeoffs was a slow one. Slow airspeed was another liability. Helicopters and the personnel they transported became extremely vulnerable to ground fire, especially with the increasingly frequent use of anti-aircraft weapons. The military wanted a craft that kept the maneuverability of a helicopter, but added the speed of a jet fighter. And enter the picture, the Canucks. Avro Canada, a company based in the Mississauga area of Ontario, answered the US government's call with their proposition, the avrocar. The craft started off as Project 1794 under the direction of renowned design engineer John Frost. Frost proposed a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle, VTOL, capable of speeds of 3 times that of sound and altitude capabilities up to 100,000 feet or 19 miles. That's almost 3 times as high as the average cruising altitude of modern-day planes, by the way. The US military's interest in this craft was anything but cold. No surprises there. It sounds utterly incredible and somewhat unrealistic. Since the avrocar would need 360-degree maneuverability, Frost proposed a disc-shaped design. His prototype would work by combining the coanda and ground effects. The coanda effect describes the tendency of air to stick to a convex surface following the outward curve. The force of this airflow creates an equal and opposite reaction on the other side of the object, causing lift. This is the same principle that allows airplane wings to take to the sky. The ground effect is when an aircraft is close enough to the surface to create a high-pressure cushion of air between the two. This is the floating sensation you feel when a plane is about to touch down. Since the aircraft needed VTOL capabilities, it could not rely solely on forward motion to create the coanda effect. Frost proposed a new engine design that would allow for high-pressure airflow downward to spur the ground effect. To keep the center of gravity as close to the middle as possible, the whole design surrounded the pilot in the cockpit with the fuel tanks. And that sounds quite terrifying. A series of shutters, control surfaces, and a turbo rotor in the middle would direct the flow of air through the aircraft and out the bottom. These same mechanisms could redirect the stream of air and move the craft in any direction. In theory. The engine design Frost proposed turned out to be too costly, so they swapped it for a series of turbojet engines mounted around the disc. And with that, the test pilots presumably let out an audible sigh of relief. When the pilots finally took the avrocar into the air, the flying saucer was well short of expectations. The ground effect that gave the disc its initial lift turned out to be the only lift the craft could attain, and the higher the craft went, the more unstable the air cushion beneath it would become. It was comparable to trying to balance bounce on top of a beach ball. Or to put it another way, if you stand a hubcap at an angle on its side and let it fall, it's eventually going to settle flat on the ground, but not before a period of wobbling around in a circle. This hubcapping motion was how the avrocar's instability manifested. The test pilots were in a constant battle against the craft, jockeying the stick to maintain stability. Another shortcoming that plagued the avrocar was its slow turning time. Making a 90-degree rotation took 5 seconds. If the pilot were making the turn the other way, opposite to the rotation of the turbo rotor, those 90 degrees would take 11 seconds. Not quite the maneuverability and speed the military was looking for. Frost and his team went back to work. They tweaked and tuned the craft, making adjustments like adding wings and a tail to counter the hubcapping instability. But that made it too similar to existing planes. The changes made to the avrocar brought too little improvement too late in the game. VTOL capability was already being developed using other means in different aircraft. After nearly 10 years of trial, error, and more than $10 million in Pentagon investment, the military scrapped their high hopes for the avrocar. They withdrew their funding, forcing the project to shutter. Nowadays, aircraft like the F-35 have instantaneous computer correction to make its VTOL capabilities practical. With the advanced nature of modern-day technology, who knows what could happen if we revisited the astrocar? Around the same time, Avro Canada and the US military were developing their flying disc, a company based on the opposite end of North America was working on theirs. In 1964, Houston-based Astro Kinetics revealed their Astro 5 dynafan. Right from the start, the company had high hopes for their craft. According to the company's press release, the dynafan will conceivably bring a truly third dimension to commuter and personal transportation. The design of the dynafan was nothing like any company had attempted before. The finished prototype resembled a large metal parachute with the pilot sitting in a seat dangling from the canopy. Its function depended entirely on the Coanda effect. That was the principle we mentioned before, the same one that allows wings of airplanes to lift them into the sky. But instead of the curved surface being a wing with the dynafan, it was the entire structure of the craft. A fan on top would pull air in and down onto the dome's curved surface. That airflow would create the high-pressure area beneath the dome, lifting the dynafan off the ground. No need to use the ground effect to take off. The company likened the dynafan's functionality to that of a helicopter, only easier to control, and unlike a helicopter, it had no complex moving parts or control systems. The simple operation of the Astro 5 dynafan will permit anyone to operate this device with the same ease and facility of the automobile. Astro Kinetics claimed their craft was ideal for military and industrial settings. In fact, the company claims that a model scaled up could have a 100-foot wingspan, that's about 30 meters, and it'd be capable of lifting 250,000 pounds. But their bold statements did not end there. They plopped the cherry on top of their sweet reveal by concluding, it again becomes obvious that the Astro 5 dynafan is the solution to the current United States military dilemma concerning VTOL lifting and movement applications. Very, very bold words in the face of the Pentagon's failed avrocar investment. Despite all the grand statements, though, the dynafan's lifespan was short-lived. In 1964, pilots demonstrated the craft in an indoor hangar. Although it was a tethered flight, they successfully launched the craft 9 times, hovering in the air for observers to gawk at. However, that seemed to be the only time the craft took to the skies. Available records show that the dynafan project seems to have simply petered out. The project's end could be because of the craft's lack of horizontal speed, or maybe it was just investor fears stemming from the failure of the avrocar, or it could have just been the untimely death of Astro Kinetics founder and president Freeman Berger. Whatever the reason, the dynafan barely got off the ground before it was relegated to UFO history. Though it uses different principles than the avrocar and the dynafan, the Wingless Electromagnetic Air Vehicle, or WEAV, can give us some insight into what the flying saucers could have been if they'd had access to modern technology. The brainchild of University of Florida professor Sabrata Ray, the WEAV was first introduced to the world in 2006. It works according to the theory of magnetohydrodynamics. It's a big brain word. Electrons covering the craft create an electrical current or field that converts the surrounding air to plasma. That plasma then creates force that moves the disk by pushing against the neutral air around it. No wings, no motors, no turbines are needed. In fact, the WAOV boasts a complete lack of any moving parts. No moving parts means fewer pieces that can malfunction, boosting the craft's field reliability. It also makes it enticingly futuristic and the closest humans have got to the cool, sleek UFOs of sci-fi dreams. However, the WEAV is still a ways away from being practical. The prototype only measures 6 inches or 15 centimeters, but Professor Ray says that he can easily scale it up. But with any plans for the future, there are always obstacles. The WEAV is powered by onboard batteries. To effectively scale up, the craft would need to remain light enough to gain the lift and maintain the speed that has impressed the likes of the US military, while simultaneously housing batteries hefty enough to give it the juice it needs. The WEAV is still under development today, keeping ufologists, yes, it's a real word, waiting with bated breath. If it is scaled up successfully, humanity's first flying saucer could be used for navigation, surveillance, and transport. Though, knowing the military, they're probably gonna use it to blow shit up. The concept of a pure flying saucer, as we've imagined them in books and films, has been hard to create in real life, but the idea behind flying discs has influenced many aircraft. Though separated from the realm of flying saucers by practical human needs and the limitations of physics, these aircraft have incorporated elements of the flying saucer enough to earn them a little bit of an honorable mention in today's video. A fitting homage to the weather balloon trope in UFO conspiracies, NASA's low-density supersonic decelerator resembles a mix between a flying saucer and a parachute. When planning missions to our neighboring planets, NASA was met with the conundrum of slowing down payloads traveling at supersonic speeds in atmospheres much thinner than Earth's. The traditional parachute would be useless trying to land a several thousand-pound craft on Mars, so enter the inflatable UFO. Only NASA has to be really boring, so they named it the Low-Density Supersonic Decelerator, which, I don't know, still a pretty cool name. Testing of the LDSD started in 2014 off the coast of Hawaii, no doubt spurring more UFO sightings nearby, with the goal of using the landing craft in future Mars missions. Now it seems it will be Earthlings gliding down to the surface of Mars in futuristic flying discs, so, well, we suppose the tables have turned. The concept of flying discs has gone beyond the fascination of amateur ufologists. Again, totally a real world somehow. Had captured the more practical imaginations of aeronautical engineers. Round wing planes are fundamentally different from the sleek design and function of the mythical UFO. Like normal planes, they have a body that houses the cockpit and fuel tanks and wings that jut out. They haven't got VTOL capabilities, instead requiring horizontal speed to take off. In fact, the only similarity they have with UFOs is the incorporation of the disc design, but they are worth a mention, if only to show the effect that UFO mania has had. As far back as 1911 with the Lee Richards annular bi- and monoplane, airplane designers and engineers have tried to incorporate circular designs into their crafts. Attempts at making round-wing planes range the spectrum of aeronautical endeavors from serious military endeavors like the Vought XF5U1, colloquially called the Flying Pancake, to private business ventures like Nemeth Round Wings, referred to as the Flying Umbrella, to amateur projects that are purely for fun, like the David Rowe UFO or the useless flying object. But however many disc-shaped wings soar through the air, the lives of the crafts they carry hardly ever make it full circle to meet the initial expectations of UFO enthusiasts and engineers alike. The hard truth is that existing wing technology soars above that of circular wings, and the closest thing we have to a functional flying saucer is a 6-inch prototype and interesting stories of past attempts. But it's still fun to allow our minds to be abducted with possibilities, isn't it?